Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening, wherever you are or wherever in the world you might be listening. Distribution Strategy Group is excited to bring you our technology leader panel on marketplace tools and strategies. We have some great panelists for you here today, but first we just have a couple announcements and things we want to talk about. So first off, Distribution Strategy Group is hosting the first ever AI conference for distributors in Chicago on October 3rd through 5th. Our goal for this conference is for a distribution company to come in and understand what their AI tech stack needs to look like, what steps they need to take, and walk out with an actionable roadmap for them to be ready for AI. We have some great speakers, including Zach Cass, the head of go-to-market for ChatGPT, along with a lot of great technology companies that will be presenting on their AI capabilities and what they can do for distribution companies. Second, we have Customer Experience RX from Distribution Strategy Group. This is a tool that surveys your customers and allows you to pinpoint where you are having issues in your company. Do you need more technical expertise in your Chicago branch? Is your next day delivery suffering in Atlanta? We will answer questions like these for you. So feel free to give Jonathan an email here at jbind at Distribution Strategy Group if you want to talk a little more. And then now, the stars of the show, Ryan Lee, founder and CEO of Nautical Commerce, and Tracy Bilo, Vice President of Category Management for Zorro. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Dakota. Nice to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. So we have a great discussion planned around marketplace tools and strategies, and we have two experts here that are going to be able to tell us a lot. So, we can jump right into it. The biggest strategy of all when you're creating a marketplace is how do you start? When do you know that you're ready to start a marketplace or ready to start selling on a marketplace even? Because that might be the easy first step.
Tracy, I'll defer to you. Oh, you want me to go? Okay.
Awesome. So obviously marketplaces are a useful tool for a lot of different reasons. Obviously it's broader reach. You can get additional sales. You can acquire new customers, even things like getting exposure for your brand and for your products and launching new products. But even learning about e-commerce is one of the tools that folks use marketplaces for, is to sort of dabble and get into the e-commerce space and learn where it fits within their business. So I think basically the market and where it's at, you kind of need to be involved in one in some shape or form these days, because that's where buyers are. But there are obviously multiple ways that you can do that, which we're here to talk about today. So I think the biggest thing I would always start with anybody I talk to is making sure you understand how a marketplace strategy fits within your overall strategy. It's another channel, it's another sales channel for you, and should be thought about in that way, and make sure that it's integrated into the overall company strategy as you start to go down that path.
Yeah, very well said, Tracy. For me, marketplace is a journey. You don't go from 0 to 100 instantly. You do need to understand the fundamentals of e-commerce. You have to go through that, enabling, what I call drop shipping or supplier shipped goods, and then full-fledged marketplace, right? And you can cut your teeth in this in several different ways. One, participating in marketplaces like Zorro is an amazing opportunity to learn, right? Learn not only how your own channel strategies expand, but also how buyers, your targeted buyers want to buy in a marketplace. Yeah, I agree with Tracy. You do have to have an overarching strategy around your engagement. It can't just be, hey, I want to launch a marketplace. Secondarily, I also think that it doesn't have to be instant, right? You can start by digitizing your offline orders and running that through what would normally be an e-commerce engine or a marketplace engine like Nautical, and get your internal teams acclimated, because really, if you think about what a marketplace is, it's got three different constituents, right? It's got buyers, it's got sellers, suppliers, distributors, however you want to call them. I call them vendors. And then you have the marketplace operator. And in each one of these plays, there's change management, and getting folks used to the new way to operate is really important, especially internally. And so I would start with just digitizing orders internally and then expand, out to the other constituents.
Well, now, is there any time a distributor might not be ready to get on a marketplace or start selling on a marketplace? Is there any pitfalls they should watch out for?
Well, I certainly think if it's not bought in at the top, it's a big red flag not to go down the path. So kind of back to the overall company strategy and understanding where it fits, it does require leadership investment and alignment in that direction, because there will be a series of decisions that are going to be made that you need to have that buy-in at the top. I think from there, though, it starts to go into what Ryan was saying, which is assets need to be digitized, and you need to move your way in that direction. And there are tools and systems that can help you do that. But you have to have product information digitized to list it anywhere. You have to be able to transact electronically in some way to trade orders. All those things require some investment in technology to make sure you can do those things behind the scenes. So again, back to the buy-in from leadership, that may require an investment on your side, or it may be something you already have established, but either way, it's likely going to require more than what you have in place today, and you want that buy-in.
Ryan, anything?
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree with Tracy. You do have to have buy-in from the top, but you also have buy-in from your process owners. I've seen marketplace and or digital transformation initiatives get really gummed up when you have internal resistance to the change, right? And it should not be orthogonal to the core, e-commerce strategy, meaning you shouldn't have an e-commerce site that sells direct to, your buyers and then stand at the marketplace as an aside and sell that way. It should be woven into the business model. And the best way to do that is, in my mind, really that crawl, walk, run approach. Make sure that you digitize the order first, get inventory visibility, product catalog information is critically important, as Tracy mentioned, and then move into this idea of expanding that assortment and offering it up to potential buyers.
Gotcha, awesome. And that's the crawl, walk, run approach is the best way to start to get buy-in from those product managers that you mentioned in the middle. So start slow and let them see the successes and then expand out more broadly.
Yeah, and I think it risk mitigates the capital investment, right? I mean, we all have tiger stripes here. We've been in corporate initiatives where people have spent a whole bunch of money expecting something to happen at the 2 or 3 year mark, and then the project ends in tears because like what was expected and then what was delivered are two totally separate things. And I think the crawl, walk, run approach allows you to de-risk it and find out, is there a slight adjustment in the plan at much shorter increments than waiting to the end of the road to figure that out.
Awesome. Well, so now we've got buy-in across the organization. And now somebody's coming to you either at Zoro or Nautical. I guess, Tracy, you can answer this first. What do you look for in a partner that wants to sell on Zoro?
Sure. So a couple of key things I would say. One is a wide assortment of products, right, that help us capture or fill in gaps where we're looking to fill a need for our customer base. Certainly well-known brands are great because if customers are out searching for them, then there's demand that we can help capture. So having that wide assortment is great. Strong fulfillment capabilities is key, right? Customers expect products as fast as possible. And just as importantly, they want an accurate promise. So even if it's a long lead time item, we want to make sure that it's accurate and then we're delivering against that promise. And so distributors in general, this is their bread and butter, They set up their operations to fulfill successfully. So just being able to do that consistently with an accurate promise is key. Then I come back to the data, right? We just mentioned that before already. Being able to provide quality data so that customers can get to the products they need and then validate it's the right item for them. And obviously the more content is helpful in achieving that outcome. It's helpful in providing that confidence that this is the right item I'm looking for. And then pricing, right? You have to at least be competitive from a pricing perspective. You have to be profitable on your own, but e-commerce is pretty transparent. So if we're not at a good price, no one's going to sell anything. That's not good for either of us. I think those are kind of fundamentally operationally. I think then it comes back to, do you have the digital capabilities to deliver these things, right? We can't just be handing over catalogs of product information. We need it digitized. We need to transact electronically and make sure that we can do that without many people touching every transaction. So being able to do that electronically is necessary.
That makes sense.
Yeah, for me, I look at it through two different prisms, right? Whether you're doing marketplace participation or you want to stand up your own marketplace. It's incumbent for a marketplace to aggregate demand, meaning bring the buyers. That ultimately is the responsibility of a marketplace, because if you have the buyers, then your suppliers, your distributors, your sellers and vendors will come and participate. They want to participate because they want to take advantage of that demand that's already there. And I use this analogy that if marketplace participation is not unlike advertising. You go out, you put money in Google or Facebook, and what you're doing is you're trying to get top of funnel to your website to buy, right? When you're participating in a marketplace, instead of pay per click like you would in Facebook and Google, it's pay per order, right? You have bottom of funnel. You have people with buyer's intent on the site looking at your products. That's a better cost of acquisition than participation in Google or Facebook as advertising engines. And so, number one, should an organization participate in the marketplace? Absolutely. You should unlock that pent-up demand that's already there, this captive demand that these marketplaces like Zorro have done an amazing job at aggregating and building trust in the ecosystem. To Tracy's point, logistics is a key aspect of that trust, and you have to have that muscle internally to be a good vendor on those. If you want to build your own marketplace or you want to become a marketplace, I don't think they're diametrically opposed, in terms of participating in one and building one, right? Your own buyers want choice. Your own buyers want variety. They want complementary products and services that will help in the use of that product. And if you really think about what e-commerce and marketplace does, is it removes the friction to buy. And that's really, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do.
Gotcha. Awesome. So I have one question for you, Tracy, at a point you mentioned. Then we have a question from the audience. Now, you mentioned having proper product data. Is there a way you vet through? I know that's a big issue. I think a lot of distribution companies don't think they have great data, and maybe they do, or vice versa. So I'm curious how you do the vetting process for that.
Yeah, it's a journey, I would tell you. I think that we always ask, we always try and understand upfront as much as possible what kind of product data they have access to, or if there are third-party services that they use or pull their own product data in. We try and understand that, and some industries are very good at it. The automotive industry, for example, have certain providers that everybody feeds their product data to. And so understanding that and how we can tap into that is a key way to do it. But I think we would love to be able to find vendors up front who have that information, and it's not always possible. I think every conference I've been in the last couple of years, this is a topic we all bring up at the table. We all talk about how we can get better product information from the manufacturers, who obviously have the product detail when they're creating it. It's a challenge. And so, we just try and ask a lot of questions up front to understand where they're at. We ask for some sample data up front so we understand the level of quality. And then we just work together with them to fill gaps. And we might supplement with some of those services that we mentioned. there's various ways that we can do it.
Ryan, any advice from you on getting better product data?
Yeah, I mean, in Silicon Valley, we had a word, data king makes. You know, it's interesting because quality data informs the customer, right? The buyer. And, you know, nobody's going to buy on a marketplace or purchase a product if they don't trust it. And having good, clean information, you know, is the difference between an order and someone passing and going with, you know, maybe a competitor. You know, that's it's paramount. There are providers out there. There's companies that kind of help aggregate up SKUs and look at, like, you know, UPCs and EANs and, you know, pull standardized data, you know, that they get aggregated from around the world. And so that to me is something that's interesting to consider. But you know, to what Tracy said, sometimes it's really just roll up your sleeves and make sure it's high quality data.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, so now the next question that product data leads us into this question nicely. The competitive landscape of online marketplaces continually evolving. What advice do you have for businesses aiming to differentiate themselves within the crowded marketplaces?
Well, I think the first piece is it fundamentally comes down to performance, right? You have to deliver on what's expected, because you will lose all customer trust if you put something out there, you get an order and you can't deliver, either with the product that's expected and or the timeline expected. So the first step in all of this is making sure you can perform according to those expectations. And then from there, it does come back to things like product content, being able to offer more information. Folks get to video and 360 views of the product, things that, again, instill that level of confidence that it's the right item when they're looking to purchase. That would help differentiate a partner in the process. But I think it still comes down to those baseline pieces of content and performance. From the content, though, that's what most marketplaces will use to help from a marketing perspective and serving it up in the right channels. The more data you have, the more channels they open you up to, because you have more information to share. And so again, it comes back to that. It opens the door to those channels that allows them then to open the potential for greater sales.
Yeah, from my perspective, you know, buyers purchase things from organizations they trust, as Tracy said, right? And while the industry is getting crowded to an extent, right? You know, the point is, you know, you do have buyers, and adding, you know, additional sellers and complementary products to your own catalogs helps reinforce that relationship that you have with the customer, right? And again, you don't have to be an Amazon. You don't have to add hundreds of thousands of SKUs. You could add, you know, maybe 3 or 4 complementary sellers and vendors that creates a curated boutique experience, you know, in their digital purchasing journey with you, and that is high value add. You know, there's a stat out there that, you know, during the pandemic, I believe, you know, e-commerce. If you had e-commerce, you grew at 40% year over year. If you were a marketplace, you grew at 80% year over year. So it's 2x growth because of breadth of product. And, you know, buyers enjoy the idea of one-stop shopping.
So the goal, one of the bigger goals here is if I'm hearing this right, is to build product assortment so that buyers keep coming to the same seller again and again. They learn to trust you, and they just make a repeat order from the same seller. Awesome. Well, we have the question of the hour. What's your progression with AI?
I'll let you start, Ryan, because that's probably more your knowledge base than mine.
Yeah, we get this a lot. You know, AI is big, and I do believe it's gonna usher in the next you know, revolution. You know, like the Industrial Revolution. I think it's gonna be the next revolution in terms of information technology. It's interesting because AI is a double-edged sword, right? You know, AI has proven that, you know, it can do things faster, but the question is accuracy, right? Sometimes AI likes to fib like a kid, and it goes out and it makes up data because it wants to answer something, even if it's not accurate. And so I would say it's a tool that has to be supervised. And whether you embed that into a platform like a Nautical, or Zorro embeds it in their product catalog assortment, or maybe Intelligent Assistant to make recommendations, it's going to be an interesting tool. I still think it's in its nascent phase, though, and it's something that needs to be supervised. So AI is not quite ready to go to the walk phase; it's still in the crawl phase.
Yeah, and I would say from our perspective, there's probably two different angles that I think about AI, and I am not the technology person at Zorro, but I think there's a customer-facing lens to AI, which helps personalize the experience, like Ryan mentioned, it's product recommendations, or it's what do we serve up in our marketing activities, things that can understand who the customer is and personalize that experience. But I think the other thing that's really important in AI is how it elevates your internal team capabilities, right? It helps you with your data analysis and data science work and product normalization. It helps with tools to communicate and collaborate. I do agree with Robin. It has to be supervised for sure, but I think it gives an opportunity for you to think about it across your entire business scope and understand where it could just help you become more efficient in certain areas.
Well, and now no need to name names, but I'm curious if you've seen any examples of bigger success stories with AI, maybe areas where it's working better than other areas.
Yeah, I think creating concise product descriptions in like a summary description helps. The challenge is, and this is my worry in general about AI, is we as people like to let things just do what they need to do, and if we get lazy and we let AI make super concise statements, we may be taking out critical value propositions that are going to trigger a purchase. And so again, this is to Tracy's point where it needs to be supervised, because if the summary isn't really hitting and you're getting lower conversion, you may want to go back and reevaluate. Did it really take something out that was critical for the buying purchase or the buyer's journey? So that's an area. Making something more concise is super important.
Yeah, and I would only add to that back on normalization, right? There are so many different formats for sizes, weights, dimensions, that just helping in simplicity do that by machine versus someone's manually doing it. We still have the exact same situation though, where we have to come back and actually review it as a human and make sure that we didn't take out valuable information, or that we didn't confuse it. We didn't concatenate it too much where it doesn't make sense anymore. But you can imagine in the distribution world, the normalization of something as simple as inches, IN period, IN no period, quotation marks, right? Everybody uses them a million different ways, and using tools like that to simplify is helpful.
Well, and now AI is one of the hot trends. Are you seeing any other new trends in marketplaces? What's the latest and greatest, maybe other than AI? Anything that's rapidly changing the marketplace?
I'll come back to, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll come back to personalization. I think that's probably one of the biggest focus areas that I see happening on the marketplace side. Again, as you have more and more products that are being put in a singular place, it becomes harder and harder to navigate. As a customer, you want a broad assortment, but you want it to look like there's only the 10 you needed. And so just using that information to personalize the experience is a big step. I think, everybody's gone down a pretty good path on digital payment and offering a lot of options there, but that's an area where not only do you have to have the right systems, you have to have a lot of protection in place to minimize your risk there. You can't just put a system in place. There's lots of bad actors out there who like to get into those systems and use it to their benefit. And then beyond that, I would say self-service has always been a thing. Ryan mentioned before, removing friction at points in the process is key. So any place that you can add a self-service option on your site or in your transactions or interactions is helpful for the customer.
Absolutely. For me, the technology tools that have become available are in-platform advertising, for marketplaces, right? Them becoming their own Google and Facebook. We've seen this with Amazon, right? Google and Facebook, I think, with the iOS 14 change, which really kind of tapped down on their ability to do tracking end to end. You saw a shift in spend to the tune of about $35 billion that went over to Amazon, which, that's where advertising shifted. And that came out of the coffers of Google and Facebook. So I believe marketplaces, specialized marketplaces and curated marketplaces in specific industries also have an opportunity to turn on that monetization lever. The other one is, the other, technological accoutrements of these platforms, right? Subscriptions, the ability to, subscribe, the ability to sell warranties, certifications, the ability to add services to products, someone buys some plumbing gear, there's a plumber that needs to install it. Right now, Angie's List is getting that money. Why wouldn't a business who manufactures that or specializes as a distributor in plumbing gear be able to aggregate up a list of trusted regional players that would complement that sale and make the take rate off that instead of someone like an Angie List or Google or Facebook, right? And so there's a lot of different levers that add value. And I think that's the key to aggregate demand, which is what every marketplace has to do.
Sure. Awesome. Well, now another question from the audience is, given the distinct needs of B2B and B2C environments, can you elaborate on the key differences in terms of technological tools and strategies that are used to cater to these two unique types of marketplaces? So
I'll jump in and take that one. It's interesting because B2B marketplace is a lot more complex to operate than a B2C marketplace because B2Bs typically have different types of payment terms. In B2C, you're usually just taking credit card. And the payments are what I call kind of green path or vanilla. As long as the authorization comes through, you're able to do the shipment, and your job is just to shepherd the sellers and suppliers and vendors to make sure, or even drop shippers, to just make sure that they get the product to the customer within the prescribed agreed time, right? B2B has a lot more complexity, right? You've got customer price books that have to be taken into consideration, right? You might have customer specific pricing, you might have credit limits, you might have purchase orders, invoices, you may have pay terms. A lot of it's more fintech related on the B2B side, and it's a lot more challenging than a B2C. And so can you run, like on Nautical, can you run both a B2C and a B2B website? You can. You just, on the B2C side, you take away the complexity, you turn off certain flags to not do things like credit limits and purchase orders and invoices. It's more pure vanilla credit cards. Whereas on the B2B side, it's more wholesale procurement, catering to things like, buyer hierarchy, seller hierarchy, things like that.
Yeah, and I would add to that, from a customer experience, like the shopping experience, there's less distinction. So a B2B buyer expects the same level of capabilities as when they're shopping as a consumer. They want those bells and whistles, they want the easy navigation, the filtering, all of that. So from a customer experience, it's a lot more similar. But Ryan's right, all the behind the scenes and how processing happens, there are lots more levels within that, understanding their buying behavior, consolidating buyer behavior, understanding where they're spending their dollars. Obviously, that's an important piece that doesn't probably hit as much on the consumer side.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it makes sense that B2C is just a lot simpler to do than B2B. So Tracy, question for you. Does Zorro's content department fall under the marketing group?
Content department. In an organizational structure, no, it actually lives in my world. So All of the folks that manage all of the partnerships with suppliers and the content that we're putting out on our site flows through our team as we're vetting those supplier partners, gathering it, pushing it. Then our partner teams, like our merchandising team and marketing team, then goes out and figures out how to use that information, how to display it, how to leverage it, navigation, recommendations, all of that. But I think the gathering, the owning, the normalizing, most of that lives in and starts in this team.
Gotcha. Awesome. So this is one we talked about a little bit before the show, and this is a big resistance we see in a lot of distribution companies where sales reps go, what's happening to my commission when this sale is going through the website or the marketplace? Where do I come in with this?
Well, I think part of what they have to understand is we have to cater to where the customers are, right? If the customers are going to a website first, they've already made the choice not to come to the salesperson. They want a different type of experience. And in many cases, customers do both. For some interactions, they go to the sales rep because they need a more consultative approach, and they need more information. They're maybe unsure of what they're looking for, need more of that. Whereas sometimes they just have needs that are really simple, and they're sitting at their desk one day and saying, I just need to go online and buy this thing because I know exactly what I need. And so I think it's complementary, and folks need to understand the entire ecosystem of how customers buy and try and capture as much of it in different ways as they can.
Yeah, I absolutely echo the sentiment there. The interesting part is, what we've observed with Nautical's B2B customers is, kind of a hybrid approach. One, sales-led growth, or what is really heavily B2B relational sales, because your marketplace operator or your distributor is an expert in the industry, right? Usually customers come to them because they need a guide. They need someone to explain to them, hey, I have all this choice and I have all this stuff, and here's my project and here's my specifications. What do you recommend and why, right? And there's still value in that transaction. Now, again, to Tracy's point, removing friction to sell, one of the mechanisms we've implemented is this request for quote capability. And so it allows the customer to go in and say, hey, I'm going to add all this stuff for my project to this quote. I'm going to send it over. And my assigned sales rep is going to look at that, because it's already digital, because they've already curated everything for them. They look at it, and then the sales rep can go in there and start editing that order and say, no, you don't need this. I'm going to put this in there instead because this is better for the project and it meets your quality standards, right? And so I call this digitally assisted sales, right? Where they can do that quote, send it back to the customer for them to review it. And then the customer decides, okay, I'm going to purchase this, or I'm going to rebid it and just say, hey, look, I need to re-adjudicate this because it doesn't seem to match my requirements. And the question, I think, is around the commissions and attribution. That's absolutely needs to be recalibrated as an organization when you weave marketplace into the business model, right? You don't want to disincent your sales team or create a us versus them, meaning marketplace versus or e-commerce channel versus the sales team. You want to make sure that while you increase the velocity of sales, you do shift a portion of the commission over. Now, the commissions may go down. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you're going to get more orders, and you're not going to have to do near as much work to fulfill those orders, if that makes sense. So I think that's important.
And now, do you have ways of facilitating with participating distributors to help them, to make that process easier for understanding an order that a sales rep might have helped them put together, then suddenly it comes through the website and the sales rep sitting there going, well, they work with me, and then they put it through the website. Is there a mechanism for that?
I mean, I think it's really process. It's internal process, right? There should be a way for a sales rep to escalate that internally and just say, look, this came to me first. They went and did it this way. I don't know if there's cost arbitrage to do it that way. Maybe they just seem to shift channels because of ease of use. But the organization should have a way to, attribute some of that sale to the actual sales rep.
Awesome. Well, we're out of questions online right now. I'm surprised. I thought we were just going to be totally going off website online questions there, but feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. But going into tech stack, I think is one of the things that we wanted to talk about here was tools. So, what is bare minimum tech stack? And then, how do you start to elevate yourself and differentiate yourself with tech stack?
I'll start with that, Tracy. It's interesting because I think the marketplaces of yesteryear, and I speak of 2 decades ago, this technology just wasn't accessible. It wasn't approachable. You literally had to, cobble together 12 or 13 different systems to build a marketplace. And that's expensive, not only on, the integration work, but also the technical footprint that you have to have and the labor force that you have to manage all the integrations and all the data streams that happen to try to make sure you get this workflow correct. Fast forward to today, and not to mention the operations team, right? As an operations team, when they're doing fulfillment, they have to jump into 12 different systems. There's mega queuing issues around that. Fast forward to today, more modern platforms like, Nautical, and what Zorro has, it's interesting because, these platforms were designed, to orchestrate a transaction end to end in a way that is labor efficient. One of the most expensive ways to launch a marketplace, and I think one of the questions is build versus buy. I think we're in a world where you have to buy and build. It's never a binary. And so, for me, one of the most expensive ways to operate a marketplace is to go in and say, okay, let's try to cobble this Frankenstein together. And any deficiencies, we're just going to throw people at it. That is your most expensive way to do it. And so it's critical to make sure that, whatever platform you choose has an ability to orchestrate in a way that's labor efficient, because it's not just platform fees, it's total cost of ownership. If you have an army of people that have to operate it and an army of tech folks to keep things running and integrated, that is hidden costs.
Yeah, the only thing I would add on top of that is it relates to the business process and the workflows and making sure that those workflows are happening in the most efficient way and isn't so embedded in a single system that it's reliant on that one system to process all the way through. It has to be able to handle independently so that you can move quicker through the process. So think about something like pricing, right? You might want pricing to live in its own space because there are lots of nuances and intricacies there, and you don't want other parts of the workflow to hold up what you need to do on the pricing side. And so again, it's a process question though, and a workflow question, and making sure that the design meets what you're trying to do, and then ultimately pushes the best experience out to the customer.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, now, so I have a question that'll probably lead into one of the questions we have from the audience. What are big legal issues that you see with selling on marketplaces? Like, I know there's some competitive agreements. What have you seen coming up that is a challenge for distributors that they need to solve? Tracy, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So we talked a little bit about this before we hopped on even. I think one of probably the most interesting challenges is when distributors have geographic contractual obligations, right? They have regional limits and territories on where they're allowed to sell. And obviously the e-commerce world is available to anybody online and visible to anybody, I should say. And so the minute that someone goes out trying to buy a product and all of a sudden they say, well, you're located here, so we can't sell it to you for this reason, that takes the sale away. That's probably an obvious one that we talked about. Certainly there's a lot going on around product compliance and consumer privacy, and just making sure that you're very in tune with what's going on. You have the right teams in place to understand your policies and procedures around that to protect yourself. So whether it's your partner and making sure your partner is set up for that, or you building it yourselves. Those regulations are changing regularly, so you have to stay on top of those and think about what that does to your business model.
Yeah, it's totally agree, Tracy. It's interesting because the bar's been raised, right? As these platforms mature, let's take Amazon or Grainger or Zoro or these mega marketplaces. The impetus for allowing a breach or something to slip just isn't palatable anymore, not from a consumer or even a buyer perspective, nor from legislators. There's a lot of marketplace facilitator laws that are emerging, mostly in the fintech world, which is really around taxes and revenue recognition and attribution of who's making money on these marketplaces, but also with respect to what you've said, privacy, data protection, data residency, right? You may want to sell worldwide, but there's a reason why some of these mega marketplaces actually has a US version, and they have a UK version, and then they have an Asia Pacific version. Could they do it all online? Yes, the technology doesn't prevent that. What prevents that is the regulation. And data residency, right? Where does that data reside and where is it stored? And so these are all things you have to take into consideration.
So that leads into this one. Now, nobody needs to reveal the secret sauce or give anybody any backdoors, but what are best practices or technological advancements you've seen being employed to ensure data privacy, prevent fraudulent activities, or maintain trust in online marketplaces?
Yeah, I'll start with this one, Tracy. The interesting part is you have three, in my mind, kind of three pillars here. One is anything with payments or money. You want to make sure that you've got a payment provider that is tokenizing this information and storing it in a way that if a bad actor were to get a hold of your system, none of that data is compromised, right? B2B is largely done with bank accounts, account routing numbers. A lot of these don't really have a lot of protection. Your credit card gets compromised, the bank's going to refund your money. Your commercial bank account gets compromised, there's no protection there. And so you want to make sure that this information is stored in a very or highly protected way. So that's number one. Personal information, right? PII, personally identifying information. You also want to make sure that this is protected because this has been a great vector for hackers. And then third, and I think this is unique to B2B, a lot of B2Bs make you log in as a buyer to even see the pricing or the catalog. And this is a great way to prevent, unauthorized users or competitive organizations from getting pricing and comparisons. And it's absolutely a tool that, we've woven into the fabric of Nautical, where you can actually have a login wall that either shields pricing or even shields the entire catalog altogether until you actually are an approved buyer.
Well said.
Awesome. So then the next question here is, could you share some best practices to lower the NPI launch time on marketplaces, considering not all of the content is 100% complete at the time of launching NPIs on marketplaces?
Oh boy. Well, I think it's a journey, right? There are some fundamental product information that you have to transact, right? There's baseline information that you have to start with, and you could decide to jump in with that basic information and still transact. And in some categories, honestly, it might be enough, right? We find oftentimes in replacement parts, as an example, people know the item number of what they're looking for because they're looking for something specific. If they can go to the site, find it, buy it, they're usually in pretty good shape. But if it's something more exploratory than that, or maybe they don't understand exactly what they're looking for and they're browsing a little more, we would expect there's a lot more information. And so we make sure that we work through that with partners. And again, we talked about third-party services to supplement that data where we know it's going to be necessary for people to buy. I mean, most people aren't going to buy things without seeing a picture of it, right? An image of some sort to validate that it's the right thing. Certainly if it's a color or a style that they're looking for, they expect that for sure. But if it's a little piece, a nut, a bolt, a drawing might be fine, right? There are just variations based on the type of products that need to be taken into account.
Ryan, anything you want to add on to that one?
Nope. That is uniquely an operator's challenge.
Awesome. Well, I think we're pretty well wrapped up with questions. I don't know if somebody wants to touch on the Title 25 California Code of Regulations being a possible nightmare for marketplaces.
Yeah, this is the marketplace facilitator stuff. And it's interesting because I think the Wayfair verdict regarding taxation and nexus of sales tax really kicked off these marketplace facilitator laws. And so now, every state and, every province and every country has now decided to kind of jump on board. And it makes sense. I'm a payments geek. At the end of the day, I come from the fintech world. Our biggest concern is, anti-money laundering, making sure that you're compliant with anti-terrorist financing, and your customer or your vendor that you're working with. And so marketplace facilitators, if you think about it, if you're a seller on a marketplace and you don't do a KYV or a KYC, you could be enabling a bad actor that could be selling products and actually fulfilling them for you, but you're pushing money to them and they're not actually allowed to receive money. And so, these marketplace facilitator laws are being designed, obviously, as revenue centers for the provinces and states, but they're also to protect, the world at large from, counterfeit goods, from ending up in the hands of consumers and businesses. But that revenue line funds terrorist activities. And so, it's a much bigger issue than just the fact that, it's a facilitator law to make sure you know who the customer is and you know how to account for the taxes of it. There's actually a much bigger strategy at play across the governments, and it's actually a good one. So it's appropriate.
Tracy,
I think we
anything
talked about some interesting things today. I would just add this isn't as scary maybe as we've made it today. I think there are so many different options and people who have been successful. And I think we've also showed today you can do any or all of these options. You can do them together. I mean, we have partners today who list their products on Zoro and they have their own marketplace and they complement each other very well. There are ways to do this as long as you, again, have that buy-in internally, you have the strategy set, and then you understand the role of each. It can work very well together. Like I think about partners we have. If you're a food service vendor, you might be targeting, hospitality and restaurants in those spaces yourself, and everything that you do is tailored very explicitly to that customer base. But then there's a manufacturing site over here who buys kitchen supplies for their break room. You're probably not going after them, but partnering with a marketplace who has that kind of reach allows you to sell into new channels. And it really is truly complementary. So I think there are lots of options for folks. I think, we've got a great partnership. Nautical's got a great partnership. There's so many ways that they can go about this with people who have the expertise. And it really helps people get started when they don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, great point, Tracy. And the interesting thing is that the technology is maturing every day, and there's even more emerging technology that helps, right? We talked about this marketplace facilitation thing, but there are tax providers out there like Vertex and Avalara, that help you make sure that you're compliant with taxation and marketplace facilitator laws, right? And KYV and KYC, which is just knowing who your vendor is and knowing who the customer is isn't as challenging as long as you're using a tool like LexisNexis or Socure or Alloy or Middesk. So there's plenty of tools that can help you, and it's good to have a technology partner or a marketplace like Zorro that can kind of help you navigate participating in these marketplaces. And to her point, it isn't very scary because the road has been paved by folks before you that have done this rinse and repeat. And so, when you do have experts like Zorro or Nautical that can help you kind of navigate these, waters, if you will, you greatly increase the chance of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And we agree. And that's why we're putting on the Marketplace Tools and Strategy Tech Panel, so that people can hear your expertise and understand, hey, these are the things you need to watch out for, and these are the people that can help you. So we want to facilitate that for our audience, because you need to be selling on marketplaces. Like that's the end game. You have to be there. If you're not, you're behind. So, all right. Well, with that, I think we can wrap up. I just have a couple things to talk about for our upcoming programs. On September 7th, we have how to make your CRM initiative successful. This is a distribution leader panel. This is with Stephanie Kuntz from Palmer Donovan, Tara Nabel of Chadwell Supply, and Dana Lingard, previously of AZP. This is brought to you by White Cup. And then on September 13th, we have warehouse and supply chain technology, featuring Pat Hanrahan of Numina Group. He's going to give you, sponsored by Epicor, he's going to give you some best practice ways that you need to have technology in your warehouse. So with that, I think we can sign off. Ryan, Tracy, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.